I'll now look at a student application for a student applying for admission at the Medill School of Journalism. As I look at this student's academic record, they present a GPA of 3.81. While not a perfect 4.0, still a pretty commendable score. Ideally, we want to see students getting near perfect grades or at least highly competitive grades. From what I can see on their coursework, I do see that most of the courses they are taking are honors courses as well as AP curriculum. So that actually does soften that grade a little bit, knowing that they're taking most likely the most rigorous coursework available to them. I'll move forward wanting to know a bit more about how the student would perform academically. And where I would look for that would likely be test scores. As I move to test scores, I see that the student scored a 1550 on their SAT, as well as 5s in all of their AP testing. So that concern I had around the GPA, it is likely the student is a pretty near top performer in their coursework, and they could keep up with the pace of academics at a university like Northwestern. So I'll move forward feeling pretty comfortable with that GPA and what I've learned about the student academically. Next up would be the student's activities list, as well as any honors and accolades that they've received. The student was the editor-in-chief of their school newspaper, also involved in athletics, and also worked a job outside of school. I always like seeing students that spend some time in a professional environment, whether that is just to build up some personal finances or to support family members. The skills you're learning in a role and a job outside of school are going to be pretty relevant to life in university as well. So something worth sharing should a student have that to share. I do seeing the student being involved in activities other than journalism outside of their stated interest. I see they're a community volunteer. They also do summer programs as well as helping teach foreign language as well. Right now, the biggest drawback I see in the student's activity section is clearly there is a lot of depth involved in their core interests, those being journalism as well as some community efforts. However, a few of their efforts are only 1 year in length or just took place over a break. Ideally, it's helpful for students to have a commitment that they're committed to for more than 1 year. While this isn't explicitly a knock, it shows maybe a bit of lack of commitment, or maybe the student isn't doing as much as they're presenting here. When I only see them doing something over breaks or for their first year only or second year only, that does make me a bit hesitant. I do the depth in the areas where there are depth, but I am a bit cautious as I move forward here. Moving to the honors section, I see the student has won the Volunteer Service Award multiple times, and I see that they've also won musical awards for their performance as well. The biggest drawback in their honors section is they only have 4 honors listed when all students have the opportunity to offer 5 different honors or titles that they've won. Seeing only 4 makes me question across all their time in high school, they were only to achieve 4 different areas of recognition. This includes, we do accept Dean's List, we do accept any sort of national or regional awards. So seeing an incomplete list or not taking up all the opportunities that they can does make me a bit hesitant about how the student performs in different spaces if they're not able to put 5 different achievements down. In combination, the honors and activities list reach a level of being satisfactory, but I am pretty hesitant as the satisfaction only comes in areas that they're committed to. I would like to see a little bit more well-roundedness and a bit more commitment than what they're offering currently. So I'm a bit hesitant, but I will continue my read here to know more about this student. I'll move now to the student's personal statement. And right off the bat, with this personal statement, I see a formatting error. There's a few extra spaces right as this essay kicks off. It is such a small detail, but it's one that immediately grabs my attention and distracts me from the rest of their essay. That is one of the reasons why I and many other people push for proofreading over and over so as to avoid these types of mistakes, especially so proofreading in the Common App itself. Right now, it just draws my attention away, even though it is likely just an error between transferring it from one file onto the Common App, but ideally we're not making those mistakes, so there doesn't have to be a distraction there to begin with. The student's writing overall in this essay is pretty strong. They share a story about visiting family members outside of the US and do a very good job of engaging a reader with details, creating a very vivid image in the reader's mind's eye. Their voice comes through pretty clearly, And I do that they're also taking advantage of formatting, creating spacing on the page to bring out certain sentences for certain lines of dialogue as well. I do like students who take advantage of that, as it is refreshing to read that versus just blocks of text. As I finished this read, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I moved on past that initial proofreading error that I had seen initially. Sometimes those mistakes are far and few between, but we do have to make note of them when we do notice them, just in case it's a pattern and not just a one-off error. But overall, I walk away from this writing, feel that the student would be a pretty compelling writer, especially for a student interested in journalism, where writing would be a big part of their time on campus. And right here, I'm reading the supplement, and the student's telling me a bit more about Northwestern as their choice. And something they do very well is they don't just talk about the strength of the program. I want to reinforce that for students who are applying to a strong program somewhere, simply saying that it's a strong program and that's your reasoning doesn't fit the bill. We need more than that. And this student does that and more. They talk about certain needs that have yet to be met in the journalism landscape and the industry writ large. And they also speak to Northwestern's character as a journalistic community. They cite specific examples of ways that student journalists on campus have impressed him as a student, and also ways that the student has noticed and tracked some of the going-ons of the national conversation, and Northwestern has contributed to that. This student offers specific examples of the way that the Northwestern student community, specifically the journalist community, have really stood out when it comes to either national politics or different events going on in the world. I do find that pretty impressive that they've done the research and have actually taken note of the behaviors of existing students. That shows that they're not just committed to a brand or an institution, but they're committed to the students that make that brand and that institution. And that's a very positive sign. I think that's a very good thing to connect into versus just, the prestige of a competitive institution. So I leave this essay being pretty impressed. I finish my read of the supplementals and I'm pretty impressed by the argument that they're offering. They don't just state the strength of the program and how they individually feel they can contribute. They also point to ways that the Northwestern journalism community is unique in comparison to other schools. They've made a pretty convincing argument, so I am leaving here with pretty high praise for their supplement. Now let's do a summary of my overall read with the student. Academically, the student had a 3.8 GPA, but that, in my eyes, is reinforced by the fact that they're taking challenging curriculum, scored very well on their SAT, as well as other standardized tests. I do feel the student meets the bar for being able to keep up and succeed academically at a school like Northwestern. For their activities and honors list, I feel the student met the bar, but maybe didn't go beyond that. What I'd like to see more of is more depth involved in the activities that they've chosen. Outside of their core interests, they could do a bit more, but what they're doing in their core interests, they are doing very well, and I have to commend that. In terms of the student's writing, I do have to make note of the fact that there were some formatting errors right at the start of their essay. In terms of the writing, the student did a good job sharing more about themselves and presenting a very convincing writing voice. I was not distracted. I didn't sign off right after seeing some formatting errors right at the start of their essay. Thankfully, that was just a one-off mistake and not just a pattern that existed throughout the essay. And then finally, with their supplemental materials, I did feel they were able to make a pretty convincing argument. This is probably the most impressive part of their essay, just because of the amount of work and preparation they did. They made a very convincing argument for this institution over all others. I didn't feel as though they could replace that essay. I could tell they spent individual time on it. And finally, their supplement. I think this is the most impressive part of their application in my eyes. It shows they went and did individual research. They have a very good sense of the student campus community when it comes to journalism. And they made a very convincing argument for this school in a way that you couldn't replace another school's name in that essay. This was specific to only Northwestern, and I think they benefited from it. Overall, I could see the student having a place on campus. I would move them on for further consideration, knowing that some of my hesitation would be some of their outside of classroom activities and depth, but all the other areas of the application do point me towards them being a successful student. So I would look forward to further evaluation there. Thanks for spending time with me. I hope you enjoyed.